This is the Captain Crypto Show, navigating the treacherous seas of cryptocurrency to help you arrive at port safely and secure your loot. Here's your host, Kylan Hurst.
Welcome aboard, ladies and gentlemen, to the Captain Crypto Show. Tonight, we're going to be doing a critical analysis of the first draft of the white paper for the EOS-based decentralized application, Everipedia. So, if you're asking yourself what Everipedia is, as you can probably tell from the name, it's a project where they're looking to utilize decentralization and blockchain technology in order to create an improvement over the widely popular Wikipedia, and possibly even create a popular successor. So in contrast to some of the other projects that we've analyzed in the past, this one is a little bit different because this is actually a decentralized app that they are creating. So it's not its own blockchain. And in fact, they are looking to implement or to build this decentralized app on the EOS network. And for those of you who have heard our Sink or Sail episode that we did before, we've analyzed the white paper for EOS. So I figured it was kind of fitting that I analyze a project that it is built upon another project that I've also already analyzed. So I think that kind of makes sense. So if you want to follow along, you're welcome to. I think I'm probably going to get like a screen capture here or screen recording of me going through the white paper. So that way, if you want to follow along, you're more than welcome to. So I should also mention that one of the reasons that I decided to analyze Everipedia is that they actually just recently, within the last week, dropped their white paper, their official white paper. I guess it's a draft technically, but it sounds like it's their the first white paper they've put forward. So it's what they're giving you kind of a summary of their project and asserting what they are going to be attempting to accomplish with this project. So if you go ahead and Google Everipedia white paper, it should be pretty easy to find. Okay, so I have the white paper up here right now, and one of the first things you'll notice, okay, the title, a peer-to-peer encyclopedia network. Okay, cool. That's what they're trying to do. So obviously, peer-to-peer means that they're aiming for it to be more decentralized. So my initial thought is, okay, they're obviously trying to make something that it sounds like that is more censorship-resistant, right? You could also call it immutable. Or if they are going to be changing things, then they'll need some sort of consensus. But right underneath there, it says the names of the people who have published this white paper. And most of the names don't really ring a bell, at least not initially. But Larry Sanger, I actually just found this out today. If you look him up, go ahead. The irony is you can look up the article of him on Wikipedia, and he is actually one of the co-founders of Wikipedia. So my initial thought on that, of course, is that that's a good thing. You want someone who's already done some work in the trenches, who's seen what does work, what doesn't work, and who has a good understanding of the sort of process that goes into users and authors submitting content for an encyclopedia, as well as how edits will be accomplished. So they also mention here that this white paper is a work in progress, and I think that's fine. A lot of the projects in the cryptocurrency space are, some of the white papers are quote-unquote evergreen, like they'll make edits to them as time goes on. Some people like that, and some people don't. Okay, so the first major section is abstract, where they kind of go over a summary of what they're trying to do from a very high level. It is interesting here that they say they are splitting it up into 3 modules. They said a token module, a governance module, and an article submission module. So just by looking here that they are going to be having a token module, that gives you a little bit of a hint that they are going to be issuing their own tokens on the EOS network. Okay, so while you might need some of the native EOS cryptocurrency, Everipedia is going to be having their own tokens as well. So the same way you have like an ERC20 token on Ethereum, you'll have a sort of analogous token that will be issued on EOS. So I do wonder, by them splitting it up into 3 modules, whether that's for the users to get a better understanding, to make things simplified and let the readers understand what they're trying to do, or if there really is going to be something where the different modules are actually going to be very separate from one another. For instance, different, I'm not going to call them divisions, because I don't know how centralized or decentralized the organization will be behind this. But a lot of the times when you have different modules, part of the idea is that there's limited interaction between the different modules. So here they are pretty clear about what they're trying to do. I think this one sentence right here is pretty concise. These components interact to create a sustainable, decentralized, immutable, incentivized network of editors that create quality, well-cited encyclopedia articles. So they are, obviously, they talk about it being immutable and decentralized. That's a big deal because, for example, Wikipedia, if you go into China, there's a lot of parts that are very, how would I say, that are censored, usually by the government. Obviously, if you were to go somewhere like North Korea, you might not even be able to get on the internet. But in general, they are trying to, at Everipedia, they are trying to make an encyclopedia where you can't just censor it. It's not that easy. Going to try to make things more difficult for people who are trying to censor. Also, they talk about incentivized network of editors. So we're going to get into that a bit more later, but it seems like the name of the game for the EOS blockchain is kind of like game theory and incentives. That's kind of the Dan Larimer, I don't know if you call it school of thought, but it's what his focus is. And so they are trying to create an incentivized economy that gives people the incentive and rewards people for adding value to, in this case, their encyclopedia. So just like a lot of projects, essentially the better the project or the better the decentralized application in this case, the more value that the tokens that are issued on it will be. So people who are token holders have incentive to actually contribute and help try to add value to this decentralized app. So in the next section, they talk about the Everipedia network. I thought this was pretty interesting because whereas with Wikipedia, it's not very easy to, to interact with Wikipedia's backend. I actually know this myself from experience because there was a point where I was doing web scraping where I wanted to gather information with a bot, with Python, just scanning through Wikipedia, trying to get information, and trying to automate that process, and it was incredibly difficult. My guess is probably because Wikipedia was created at a time when they didn't care as much about what they call the semantic web. I know that's very technical, but essentially, I don't even know if Wikipedia has an API on the back end. So if you have like your own application or website and you want to be able to interact with Wikipedia, maybe ask Wikipedia for information, something like that, it's actually very difficult to do that. So the fact that they explicitly state here that they are looking to create an encyclopedia as part of a network, I think this is absolutely excellent. So you can tell that they are very much into the idea of information being free. And yeah, I mean, if they could create a good API, I mean, that could be used for so many different things. Yeah, in fact, they actually give an example here. It says, we imagine a future in which even non-programmers can create sites that utilize the Everipedia network through something as simple as a WordPress template. So they are trying to make the data more accessible even to the layman. Yeah, one thing I noticed is you can definitely tell the fact that the co-founder of Wikipedia is part of this project, and they explicitly refer to Wikipedia several times in this white paper. So it does give you an idea that they kind of are aiming not to take down Wikipedia, but they trying to improve upon Wikipedia, because Wikipedia is absolutely a great resource, but it hasn't exactly aged well. Yeah, I thought this part was kind of funny. It says, one clear shortcoming Wikipedia has demonstrated is its inability to capture any of the monetary and intrinsic value of content that its platform and community has created, as evidenced by biannual donation banner campaigns. So I think we've all seen those. I know Jimmy Wales is the guy that always shows up, essentially begging for money. And it's kind of crazy, right? Because Wikipedia is very useful, and it would just be a little bit nicer if there were more like an automated behind-the-scenes way for an encyclopedia to get funded or to reach financial sustainability. Okay, so here they show you the three modules: token module, article module, governance module. It is interesting over here to the right. There's a little icon that says IPFS. And what that is a reference to is something called, and the name's kind of funny, it's Interplanetary File System. And the idea is that this is a file system that is It's peer-to-peer, so it's like a network. It's decentralized. It sounds, from what I can gather, it sounds like it works quite a bit like BitTorrent. So it does kind of have that immutability behind it, as well as, I would think, probably some of the privacy. At least you would hope so, especially if this happens to be something where anyone can store some of the files, and some of that data could be considered, I'm not going to say treasonous, but maybe like the ownership or the fact that you are hosting that file and sharing it could be something that you could be punished for. Just the same way that some governments, including the American government, crack down on people who are sharing copyrighted material. So as someone who's worked with media before, obviously, I do a podcast. We upload stuff to a lot of the Steam platform, which again, Steam is a precursor to EOS in a sense. And this is something that's built upon the EOS. Everipedia is being built upon the EOS blockchain. But IPFS, I think, is technology that has a huge amount of potential. But right now, I think they're still working out some of the kinks because it is still relatively young. There are times where I try to upload something and it doesn't work. Just for whatever reason, it just doesn't work. Also, it's not always the fastest. It's not as fast as, let's say, if you were downloading something from Google Drive. But I think as time goes on, they will probably be able to work out some of those kinks. Okay, so in the next section, we get to the token module. And I think this is a little bit interesting because they do talk about minting tokens, and specifically they say here that there will be a fixed amount of tokens that get minted each day. So obviously, when those get minted, they will get distributed to whoever earns them. I think we'll get to that in a moment. But also keep in mind that a fixed amount of tokens minted per day means that while technically it will be inflationary, that means that as time goes on, the percentage of the inflation rate will tend toward zero. They've also decided upon the token code IQ, obviously like intelligence quotient. I actually think that's pretty crafty from a branding or marketing standpoint. I think that's pretty intelligent, pardon the pun. It is kind of interesting here, though, because they say that the annual mint rate will be 5% to match the EOS inflation rate. So I don't know how that matches up with the earlier statement that there will be a fixed amount of tokens minted each day. I would have to check the math on this equation, but I don't really have time for that right now. Yeah, so if you're asking where the content for this encyclopedia will be stored, looks like obviously it will be stored in the interplanetary file system. It sounds really funny to say that. In IPFS, and there are going to be pointers on the blockchain that point to where that data or where that information is. So it's not like they're going to be trying to store actual images or even text content on the blockchain, because that would create way too much bloat. So as we get into the article module, there's one part here where they say to propose and edit users, that I'm sure that includes being able to submit a new article as well. To propose and edit, users must put forward a small amount of tokens as collateral, which is returned if the edit is approved. So that way people have a little bit of stake if they have some skin in the game if they are submitting an article. So this is a measure that can be used to prevent spam. So if imagine if you're on Wikipedia and you want to, not you, but maybe someone is trolling and just wants to deface articles, it sounds like you will, if you want to do that, you're going to be costing yourself money. So that incentivizes you not to do that. So once you submit an edit, it looks like there are kind of three things that can happen here. Either your proposal, your edit is not approved and your money gets burned, or your proposal can be approved, but no token reward given, collateral returned, no token reward given. So your proposal can be approved and you get your collateral back, but you don't get a token reward. I think that probably depends on the consensus. It is interesting here that they say when your tokens are staked, they are locked by the article module for a fixed number of days, initially 21. They even refer to Steam here as well, because they do something similar on Steam, which, in my opinion, creates some usability issues. I understand that they want people to have stake in the system, not just be going in and out with their money all the time. But it is interesting that they reference Steam directly here. So here they're kind of acknowledging that they are borrowing some ideas from Steam, which I think that makes sense. Steam is something that works pretty well. I think there are usability issues, but yeah, if you want to borrow some of the good things from Steam, go for it. I mean, these are open source projects. Innovate, borrow ideas, collaborate, do what you need to. Okay, and the third tier is if your edit is approved, you get a token reward. I think if you get a certain amount of votes from people who have stake in the system, and your collateral is returned. So hypothetically, you have made a profit at that point. Okay, so here we finally get some actual numbers in the article module, where they're talking about essentially what kind of numbers you need to get in order to have your edit approved. Tier 1 is if you have less than 50% of approval votes. So essentially your edit has been rejected, you lose some money and time, you've wasted some time. If you get greater than 50% but under 75% approval, then you get your collateral back, but you don't get any additional reward. You've made no profit. Tier 3 is if you get greater than 75% of yes votes. So obviously the thing that sticks out to me here is that these numbers are arbitrary. So I have a feeling that if they decide that they want to adjust these numbers, whether it's to make things more loose or more strict, then they will be able to do that. That's something that would take place in the more governance part of the project. All right, so one of the interesting things here is that it sounds like the people who are going to be doing the validation are probably, there's a chance that they will be doing some automation. So like they won't always be going through every article or submitted edit and actually reading it line by line. Or at least that won't be the only thing that they do. So since EOS is probably going to have a very strong identity system, just the same way that Steam does. If you have an account, if you have a Steam account, I mean, you can use that account on DTube, DLive, DSound, Steam.it. And this is something that EOS actually emphasized in their white paper, is they would like you to not have to have a bunch of different accounts. They would prefer if you just kind of had one that you could use all across the ecosystem. And I think that if we're talking from a usability standpoint, I think that's great. The one thing that you do have to wonder, though, is when we're talking about an encyclopedia, people are making edits. There might be times where they actually don't want people to know who they are, right? Because if you're writing something, adding an edit to an encyclopedia that goes against, for example, what the government wants to hear or wants you to say, then you can put yourself at danger. But most likely, identity as part of an algorithm for approving edits would probably only play I'm not going to say a small portion, but not a critical portion, because you want people to still be able to submit edits and get them approved even if they are anonymous. All right, so it looks here like if you actually own tokens, you will be able to delegate some stake, because if you own tokens, hypothetically, you can be part of the approval process. But if you're someone like me where you don't really have time to be writing some sort of algorithm to approve encyclopedia edits, you can delegate your stake to someone who's, I'm not going to say job, but who does do that. And that way you can still have a say in what gets approved and what doesn't. And I actually think this creates quite an interesting economy, because that means that there are going to be people who are specifically going to be trying to become the best at approving submissions, so edits and new articles. So it'll be really interesting to kind of hear about what that process is like. So for example, if you're going to stake your money towards someone who validates articles, like you might pick, for example, someone who has similar philosophical leanings. At least that's kind of the first thing that pops up in my mind. So another interesting thing here is that it looks like if you're doing, how would I say it? If you are doing validation of edit submissions and article submissions, you can actually specialize. So if it's something where, let's say you are a professor in chemistry and you want to work mostly, whether it's automated or whether it's you manually helping to approve edits or reject edits, I guess, then you can pick a sort of specialization, which I think makes sense, because you don't necessarily want a chemistry PhD professor trying to edit articles that are on music or something completely unrelated that they might not have as much knowledge about. So it's pretty interesting here. They're actually really getting into the nuts and bolts here in this EOS.io implementation. They're talking about what technology it'll actually be using on the front end, and they will be using JavaScript. Let's see here. GraphQL, which I think QL, query language. So that'll be for accessing the database. And if you look at the bottom here, what where it says client, what that means is what kind of device or software is going to be used by the users to interact with the application. And this is actually pretty interesting. They say React Router, Redux, and Apollo. So they are going to be using React, which is a JavaScript framework. And they're even using Redux. It's funny because this is actually what I developed with at Edge. I actually have quite a bit of experience with React and Redux. And the cool thing is, since they are doing it with React, then that also means they can use React Native. So they'll be able, so the second they have a website up and running, probably very quickly afterwards, they will already have a mobile app deployed on iOS and Android. At least that's what I would expect. Yeah, so here we have like a diagram here where they're kind of showing how the system for Wikipedia works and other encyclopedias, how it's more centralized, and how essentially how the incentives really aren't there, right? So the big example is if you're submitting content on Wikipedia, you're dedicating your valuable time to submitting these articles, and you don't even get any financial compensation. And I know some people are like, oh, well, you need to be submitting articles because you care about this topic or that topic. But if you're doing something useful, man, I think you should be compensated. And at the end of the day, doing the right thing is great, but it also doesn't put money on the table. You can't feed your kid with stories about this great information you helped share with people. So in this database schema area, they get pretty technical. Obviously, they're talking more about like blockchain-related stuff, hashing algorithms, stuff like that. But I thought it was pretty cool. They drew a comparison between the way that the edits and the versioning for the articles is going to look like. They are comparing it to Git technology, and that's GIT. That's it's something that almost every programmer works with, and it's a system that works pretty darn well, and it's been tested for over a decade now, and it works very well. So I think with regards to how they are going to keep organize or keep track of versions of an article, it sounds like they probably made the right choice there. The cool thing there too is if you have two people working on the same article but like different parts, then they won't they won't conflict with each other necessarily. So that should help with the editing process. They do say here that if there is a conflict, meaning that two people are editing the same area, there's a question of, okay, well, how do you handle that? And the initial example they give of how maybe they could handle that is by only allowing one edit in the pending queue at one point. And okay, that might work, but my big concern there is sometimes you need an article about like breaking news, and you don't want to be limiting how many edits the article can be experiencing or be receiving during critical times. Like let's say there's an earthquake and there's critical information that need to get in there. You don't want to have some timeout where you have to wait an hour or 24 hours or a week before you can add information to that article. So that will be a challenge, is conflicting edits. But I think probably you could also use a consensus. I'm sure there's a solution somewhere in that you could do through consensus, I'm sure. So they are saying that the article data structure will be stored as HTML files. I don't think that there's any surprise there. HTML files are the standard file that are used for any website, really. It is kind of funny that they say they're not sure whether they'll allow someone to, because even though you can have links between different articles, they said that they're not sure whether they're going to allow someone to link to any web pages outside of Everipedia. I think that makes sense because let's start allowing people to include links to wherever they want. Of course, they're going to find a way to sneak in a link to their own website, where they're trying to direct traffic. But I guess the flip side is they would have to try to get that edit past the validators, which I guess it probably depends on the link itself. Yeah, see, and here what I was referring to about APIs, they're openly stating that they are trying to make it so that people can access this data easily and in an automated fashion. So here they say this allows easy retrievability of key value descriptors from any article using API endpoints and allows bots to add information easily to the JSON linked data class. Yeah, I'll be honest, of all the things that they talk about in this white paper, that's one thing that I think is like, that's a home run. If they can really make it so that it's easy for people to access this encyclopedia, that's something we haven't seen with Wikipedia. And at that point, you're making it so essentially people can build apps on top of I guess, yeah, on top of Everipedia. So hypothetically, there could be a future where Everipedia is the main application working with Everipedia is not Everipedia itself. It could be something that's built on top of it that uses Everipedia, the information on Everipedia, to serve people some sort of other app, whatever that app might be. Yeah, so here with blockchain agnosticism being the title of this section, if I were to read between the lines, they're talking about, okay, we're building this on the EOS network, but hypothetically, it sounds like they're making it so that they reserve the right to change which blockchain they implement it on, which I think makes sense. They do refer to Ethereum here, and they also refer to scaling, which, let's be honest, the last 12 months or maybe the last 2 years in cryptocurrency, scaling has been the biggest issue, and it continues to be the biggest issue. And I think what they're worried about is, I know with Ethereum, some of the decentralized apps, the transactions have high enough transaction fees that it makes it difficult to really have a decentralized app that people can use without having to cost them a bunch of money. And also the good thing is, since the actual data for the articles themselves are on the IPFS, the Interplanetary File System, that means that should make it easier for them to be able to switch blockchains if they want to. Hypothetically, I almost wonder if they might be able to implement it on multiple blockchains as well. So maybe hypothetically you could have something, I don't know if it'd be possible though to have it running on multiple blockchains at one time. That'd be cool if you could though. Yeah, so in this section it says bounties, services, bots, private edits, marketplaces, and network development. And of course they mentioned something that I had referred to earlier is privacy. So one thing that they're saying here is they could hypothetically, if the underlying blockchain supported something like ZK snarks, which is zero knowledge proofs, which is a privacy feature. It's my understanding that it's fairly resource intensive right now. But as time goes on, resources, computers get faster, then it might become more viable. And of course, like I mentioned earlier, that might be something that someone could be interested in if they were concerned that their government or someone might crack down on them for some of the contributions that they are making to Everipedia. Okay, so that leads us to the conclusion of this white paper. In general, I think it's a pretty well-written white paper. It's relatively concise. It was easy to understand. It seems like this project is going to be innovating on some of the other features of other blockchains that have been proven to be relatively successful. So for any of you who actually hold EOS tokens or follow the community, Everipedia is definitely like the one project. I'd almost call it like a flagship project. It's one where everyone gives it as an example of what is going to be created on the EOS platform. And I think that the fanfare that it's receiving is pretty well deserved. I think they have a lot of good ideas here. In general, I would say that I'm relatively optimistic about this project. The one area that they will need to make sure that they iron out correctly is usability, because I know EOS and Dan Larimer, Dan Larimer did Steam, and Steam, I like it. I think you could definitely call it a success so far. But there are things where, loading up your wallet, staking things, some of those things get very technical and sometimes they don't work the way that they're supposed to. And the user experience is not the best. So I think if they want this Everipedia to really become the successor to Wikipedia, then they'll have to make it easy for people to use, because your average person who's submitting Wikipedia articles or edits, they might be a little bit technical, but they're not necessarily programmers, and they might not even have much of an understanding of how cryptocurrency works. So if you really want this encyclopedia to become the next big thing, then you will have to make it more usable. You have to make it so, essentially so that Granny can submit an article if she wants to. Nothing against grannies. So I don't know exactly when the launch date is supposed to be for Everipedia. I heard some murmurs that it can't be before June, because the EOS blockchain has not launched. I think they're planning to launch in June. But so that platform will have to be built and launched before they can actually launch Everipedia as a website or as an application on the EOS blockchain. But it does sound like it'll probably be one of the earlier applications, decentralized applications, that'll launch on EOS. And I actually think there are going to be a lot of decentralized apps that are going to be launched on EOS. So I'm actually very excited about everything that's going on. And in fact, when they do launch and they start issuing some of these IQ tokens, then you don't be surprised if you see me in there maybe submitting some sort of articles just to get my hands on some of those IQ tokens. Because I think even if you don't become a millionaire from your IQ tokens, it's pretty nice to be part of the actual process, especially if you're part of the launch process and you're there in the beginning, right? Okay, so that's it for our analysis of the first draft of the Everipedia white paper. So this is the first type of episode that I've done like this solo. So let me know what you guys think. If there's something I can do to improve it, let me know. If you loved it, go ahead, give it a thumbs up, like it, share it, all that good stuff. And if you don't like it, go ahead and give me some constructive criticism, because I am trying to get a feel for what you guys want. And I think I did notice people like the analytical episodes, so I'm going to try to do as many of these as I can, as quickly as I can, which means I'll be reading a lot of white papers, but recently I found it actually to be pretty fun, so hopefully I'll be able to churn one of these out maybe every week or every other week. Also, if there's a specific project that you want me to analyze, go ahead and let me know in the comments. I'm definitely open to ideas. I think this was a good one because they just came out with the draft of the white paper. So definitely, I would probably prefer projects that are newer, because then there's not as much content out there for me to compete with just yet. So go ahead and let me know. So until next time, guys, this is your captain wishing you fair winds and following seas. Set sail. Are you enjoying the Captain Crypto Show? We've only been around for about 6 months and creating videos for only about 2 months. But in that short time period, we've been able to take our ragtag crew and start building a fleet to bring you the freshest and most critical information from the new world of cryptocurrency. But we can't do it without your help. If you like our content, consider liking this video, sharing it with some of your closest mateys, and even consider hitting the subscribe button. Although we do include our cryptocurrency addresses in the descriptions for these videos, the truth is, me and my crew prefer not to beg for our coin. After all, plundering is more the pirate's way. So hit that subscribe button and come join us on this adventure.